This is Ben Allen, founder of BC Allen Publishing Group and Tonic Books, a partnership publishing house. We made this interview for you. Why? Because it is our mission to usher into existence the world's next great wave of life-changing, world-altering books. One of those books could be inside you right now, and no writer can go from idea to bestseller alone. No writer has to. Be sure to check out the other resources we've created for aspiring and established authors and the dozens of interviews we've done with some of the world's best, brightest, and most successful New York Times bestselling authors, world-impacting movement builders, and influencers that reach millions of lives. Do enjoy. I'm here with Dicken.bettinger, who I'm just absolutely excited to be talking to. I know your work relatively well, Dicken. I've read your book, and I've looked at a bunch of interviews that you've done, and I know some people who you know pretty well. And actually, in this interview series that you're a part of, we've got Ankush Jain, and eventually I'll be interviewing Steve Chandler as well, and hopefully some other folks through the Three Principles. And so I'm just super excited to have you here and talk with you about creativity and writing and your book and the Three Principles.
Well, I'm excited to talk to you about that. I had so much fun writing the book. It'll be fun to talk with you about that whole process.
Okay, perfect. I'm going to read your bio, and then we're going to jump right into that idea, actually, of having fun writing. I think there's a lot of writers that will love that.
Okay.
So Dicken.bettinger, who's got a doctorate in education, received his doctorate. Oh, not in education. I'm sorry. A doctorate in counseling psychology, and is a retired licensed clinical psychologist. Dicken's whole career has been focused on psychological well-being. In 1986, he came across Sydney Banks and the Three Principles. Dicken co-founded a Three Principles training, counseling, and education center in Vermont, which has got to be beautiful this time of year right now. Dicken was a senior staff at Pransky & Associates in La Conner, Washington for 16 years, where he developed and led corporate and university leadership trainings, team development, and executive coaching. In 2012, Dicken founded Three Principles Mentoring. He offers 4-day immersion retreats for individuals and couples, practitioner development, and individualized training programs. He enjoys leading group seminars in the U.S. and throughout Europe. Dicken is the co-author of the book on the Three Principles called Coming Home. Dicken has been happily married for 48 years. He has 2 adult children and 3 adorable grandchildren. He enjoys photography, hiking, canoeing, and traveling. Awesome, man. So good to have you on board.
It's great to be here, Ben.
So tell me a little bit about, let's start with that. How is the writing process fun for you? I think that's so just to give you my context as well. I was a writing professor for about 7 years, and maybe that context in particular does not encourage people to have fun. I did everything in my power to make the writing really fun, but I think there's a lot of people, and as a publisher and as a consultant now, I see a lot of people who struggle with writing. They really have a lot of self-consciousness and a lot of fear and a lot of doubt and or writer's block or whatever it is that they're kind of naming their process. So yeah, I'd love to hear about how writing was fun for you.
Well, when I started my career, Ben, I started as a high school English teacher.
Oh, no way. Oh, wow.
And I often was teaching kids who hated school and hadn't done particularly well in school. And one of the classes that I was teaching was in poetry writing.
Wow.
Or in creative writing, actually. It was creative writing, which included poetry writing.
Oh, you're a man after my own heart.
So here you have a class of kids who don't like poetry and don't like writing, don't like reading. And so I just have them, I'd turn off the lights in the classroom and have them relax and take them through a relaxation exercise. And when they got good and relaxed, I said, just wait a little bit until any word pops into your mind. And when it pops into your mind, open your eyes enough to write the word down on a piece of paper, close your eyes again, and wait until another word pops in. And keep doing this until you have about 10 words. Now take those 10 words and rearrange them in any order to write a poem. That was unbelievable. Unbelievable, the poems that these kids were writing. And 2 things happened. They fell in love with how relaxing and enjoyable the creative process is. And they fell in love with poetry, and pretty soon they're writing and reading poetry and acting it out. And I've always enjoyed that process, whether it's writing or reflecting on something. For me, it's always founded in deeply relaxing and then letting things come to you. And that's how I wrote the book. That's how I wrote the book from start to finish. So it was a process of relaxation, reflection, creativity, and when things come to you fresh, they also are inspired. It's not like you trying to remember or thinking about what you should say or what you need to say or what you have to say, which is memory-based rather than freshly created based. So I wrote the book with a friend who also deeply appreciated this creative process. The first time we met, she said, well, let's set down goals for when we're going to have things done. And I said, Natasha, I know we can do it that way, but I don't want to. I want to be able to write this book completely from inspiration. And I have no doubt that if we write it that way, that it'll be a really good book and we'll get it done. But it may not be according to some kind of schedule. And was thrilled the way the book turned out and how it came out.
Okay, I've so many questions to follow up with this. I absolutely love that context. I will often talk with the writers I'm working with that and say that writing can be that experience. Like writing can be this beautiful, the Greeks had gods that were these, gods of inspiration or goddesses of inspiration. Like there can be that sense of the divine or that sense of peace or a sense of meditation or a sense of play and wildness. What it can be kind of.
Yes. Beautiful.
So tell me a little bit about how and this is probably a great place to talk about the three principles as well, but it sounds like you were able to access that even before maybe you had an understanding of the three principles. So how would you help writers to access that relaxed state?
Well, I think if they understand that our minds are built for that already, it's not a technique.
Right.
I mean, when we get quiet, thinking comes to us rather than us actively thinking, which takes effort and energy. And there's nothing wrong with thinking that way. And if you're enjoying doing that, then think about whatever you want. But if so often in the writing process, people start to struggle or it feels hard or they feel like they get blocked. And they keep trying to figure out then what to say and how to say it, rather than relaxing and then just letting it come to them. And our minds are built for that. It happens to us all day long at times when we're just enjoying ourselves or in the present moment. Things occur to us to do. Things occur to us to say to people. That's how people write songs. That's how people who enjoy writing, they just get addicted to that natural process of knowing that our minds will create naturally if we just follow into that openness.
So do you have so with those students, you would kind of walk them through a little bit of relaxation. You would just you would kind of almost remind them of that place of relaxation. Is that something?
I do. And with clients today, I do the same kind of thing, is that we can use our mind like a computer where you actively think about things. When you do that, you leave the present moment to think about something. And I said, but underneath our personal thinking, underneath our conceptual mind, there's a space within us that's always quiet. And whenever we fall into the now, we actually are falling into that space, which is just open, present, relaxed. Whether you have your eyes open or closed, it's a peaceful space. And when people fall into that space, things start occurring to you fresh. I mean, I would teach that to executives in companies because that's where people did their most productive, most inspired, most helpful thinking.
Yeah.
Right? And if you have a group of people that doesn't access that kind of thinking, they get stuck very easily on old thinking and old ideas, and they don't get anything new. And without new thinking, a business can't move forward. Right? So, but I mean, it's the same for us too. And it's interesting to me that when I see most adults feeling stressed or upset, they're not relaxing into that open space where their own common sense and wisdom and good feeling will emerge. I see them thinking harder about the problem or the issue or trying to figure out what to do or how to deal with it. Yeah. And you can't think your way to wisdom, and you can't think your way to new thinking.
And help me understand and help the listeners understand then, like, so you don't think your way there. The way to access that, or maybe it's not even a way, but it's just an understanding, like through the three principles, there's a kind of way to understand that the way the mind works and the way consciousness works and the way that thought works. And yes. By having that understanding, it allows us to let go of patterns that keep us from our natural state. Is that a way to?
Yeah, it is. It really is. When and then tension and stress and upset are really helpful indicators that we're starting to use our minds in a way that's not very wise or helpful. We're trying to use our intellect for something it wasn't built for or intended to do. And so that feeling can wake us back up to the now. We're just stuck in some old thinking that's not particularly helpful. And the good news is, for anybody I've ever met, anywhere in the world, any culture that I've taught in, any country in the world I've gone to teach, when people's heads clear, they get new thinking and they feel better.
Yeah, I can see that in experience. Yeah,
automatically.
Definitely. Yeah,
and when people who are really creative learn to allow their minds to settle out and quiet down, so that they do tap into this deeper flow of fresh new thinking, and then it becomes fun. Do you know something in line with this, Ben, that I think you might be interested in? Natasha and I worked together for 2 years to write this book. And we only did it, a lot of times when we talked, we just shared inspiration and our latest ideas and thoughts. And we just had the best time sharing that with each other. And then when we went to write, we never had a disagreement or argument in 2 years. Because if we wrote something and one or the other of us didn't like it, we just say, well, that doesn't quite feel right to me yet. And rather than trying to figure out how to change what we had already written or trying to rewrite that, we'd both get really quiet. And then after a while, always, one or the other of us came up with something that we both liked way better than the original thing we had written. So that it became a true collaboration, that if something wasn't coming out exactly right, collaboration just meant we'd open to wisdom and see what wisdom would bring us that would help move that forward, help bring some fresh thinking to it, help re-inspire that piece that had gotten a little dry. And so not only was it enjoyable for each of us individually, but collaboratively. I learned so much about true collaboration. It's not disagreeing and then agreeing to disagree, or it's not disagreeing and then working hard just to compromise. It's disagreeing becomes opportunity to be even more creative.
Hey, Dick. Okay, so how did you guys come to the conclusion that you wanted to work together in the first place?
Well, Natasha and I were doing some Skype calls where I was sharing with her what I had learned about the three principles,
Mm-hmm.
and mentoring her. And she, after we talked, she would sit down and write out what she had heard in a fresh, inspired way, and then send it to me as an email. And that would usually help us know what to talk about next. And after we had about 10 of these calls, I don't know, I think it was around that many, and she had sent me all these emails with what we talked about, and it was like when I would read what we had been saying to each other, I said, "Oh my gosh, this is really clear and really good, and would be really helpful to people." And simultaneously, she said, "Would you consider writing a book together?" And I had just been thinking that. And so he said, "Well, let's try it." And she transcribed some of the talks I had already done and sent those to me. And we just started talking more. And then we started getting together. I don't know. One year we got together 45 days, whether it was at my house or her house in Denmark, or whether it was while we were doing trainings in England or wherever we were at conferences. We'd spend a couple extra days together. And then when we had things written, we could screen share on Skype and then pull it up and then go through it and talk about it.
And what do you think the benefit, I mean, you were sort of talking at great length about the benefit of writing with somebody else. Would you, do you prefer to write that way at this point? Or do you write on your own as well? Or?
Well, there's benefits to both. I mean, it was really fun doing it with Natasha because to be able to bounce your ideas off of somebody else always helps you to get greater clarity.
Yeah.
And that happened for both of us.
Yeah.
And then it also helped us in organizing to really be sure that when it came down to getting it in an order that would be really reader friendly, to have someone, and Natasha was better at that than I was. So having someone to talk to and get that sorted out, I think it just made it a much better book. Yeah. Then we had a really good editor who helped us really clean it up well. So.
And so did you, okay, so like I'm thinking like I'm going into editor mode and I'm going into kind of consultant publishing mode, and I'm like, you know, a lot of books are, when people are talking about books and when people are thinking about books as a product that will sell, they're thinking a lot about, well, first of all, they're thinking a lot about deadlines, which sounds like that wasn't necessarily in like a place of focus for you guys.
Yeah, we didn't do deadlines.
Yeah, I want to ask more questions about that specifically, but also people like think about like who's the audience for the book and what exactly do I want to what do I want to share with this audience? And what I'm hearing from you is those things may have been present, but what you were really thinking about was like you were diving into inspiration and you were letting that kind of dictate the writing.
Yeah, it did. It led the way for us.
Yeah, and that is there a kind of This might be me projecting, but on my side, it feels like there'd be a kind of a letting go of like outcome or something, or letting go of a particular imagined result within a particular imagined timeline. Was there a letting go in that, or was it? Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you're seeing that, Ben, because that is true. When we talk about learning the three principles, is as you begin to gain a deeper understanding of how the mind works, you begin to get a greater and greater appreciation for its creative capacity. And the more you explore that, the more it leads you to a lifestyle that's where you're not, your life itself is no longer governed by shoulds and have-tos and any kind of thinking that creates pressure or stress. And if you are continually letting go of any thoughts that create pressure or stress or upset, you begin to then discover a whole new way of just living your day-to-day life. And so in this context, writing was just an extension of how Natasha and I were living our lives at that time. You know, when we had problems and issues, we would relax into the space where we had greater clarity, perspective, common sense, where we could access new ideas, new thinking, where we would find feelings that were uplifting rather than weighing on us. And so it was just part of a bigger understanding about life.
Yeah, like the result of the book was also kind of baked into the process of the book, or like the outcome of the book for the readers. Yeah.
Well, the perspective presented by the book, which is the nature of the mind and how it operates, and how in our natural state, well-being is built into us.
Yeah.
And without understanding how the mind works, people can easily think in such a way that it covers over their natural capacity for well-being.
Yeah.
Easily, innocently. I did for years. I was 10 years a psychologist before I came across this man called Sydney Banks, who had had a profound realization of the nature of the mind and talked about how every human being already has perfect mental health through well-being inside of them at core. It just gets covered over by thinking that's a result of not understanding very clearly how the mind works.
And my mind is going to the kind of technical side of it all. And it's like with the writing, like I first of all, I just want to say and for anybody listening as well, that's going to be hearing this interview, there's like a million different ways to write a book. And I absolutely love hearing each person's kind of approach to it.
Yes.
And I absolutely love like the fun that you're talking about is accessible to everybody. And part of the fun of writing is letting go of those stressful thoughts. And I can really see that clearly in what you're saying. And then, or not letting go, but whatever, recognizing them and kind of living in a life that just isn't in the shoulds and the shouldn'ts. And then the second thing is, is there any kind of sacrificing of outcome? So if you're not living within a timeline and you're not living within a particular result on the reader or something like that, a particular outcome for the book itself, do you think that there's a sacrifice of potential? Do you know what I mean? You know, I think Michael Neal talks about this in some of his work on three principles, where he says actually this allows us to perform at an even higher rate.
Yeah, and timelines emerged naturally. It's not like we didn't have timelines. They just emerged organically rather than some kind of external artificial decision that we got wedded to.
Gotcha.
When goals and timelines are in service of inspiration.
Right.
They don't overcome or override inspiration.
Yeah, that's a good distinction.
Right? It's a little bit like when you're sailing a boat. It's not like you don't say, let me go in this direction.
Uh-huh.
But at any moment, given how the wind blows, given how wisdom blows, you're willing to tack and take another route. And you're not being counterproductive. You're actually being more productive.
Right, because you're not fighting the wind.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's a beautiful metaphor. That's really nice. Awesome. And then so another question just about the structure of the book that naturally arose for you guys, where you've got this.
It did
Yeah,
very naturally. It's not like you ignore all of that stuff that's so helpful to any writer.
Right.
But it either emerges organically or you try to impose it from what you think you should do or what other people tell you should do, and
Right.
and that can become limiting for people.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. So I studied poetry as well, Dicken, and I taught poetry for years at universities and colleges. Yeah. So
boy,
when we talk about poetry, I would often say to my students, and we're in the era of free form. Like people nowadays can write anything from strict, tight Shakespearean sonnets with iambic pentameter and certain rhyme scheme, and then they can write something that doesn't even look like a poem. It's just a block of text, like a prose.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I would say to my students is something very much like what you're saying here, which is just let the content, let the creative energy. I always called it following the energy. I said, let the energy dictate the form. Let the form just kind of emerge organically by you just dipping into what really excites you.
It's a great way to live your life, not just to write poetry.
Yeah, that's really, I love that. That's so great. It is a great way to live your life.
That's what I travel around the world and teach.
Yeah, that's so cool.
That's beautiful.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's so much more I want to learn about the three principles, and I know that you've got an event coming up here in Portland really soon, and I'm not sure that this will get out before then, but in case it does, there's an event you have on October 21st and 22nd in Portland, Oregon, with a couple of other teachers.
21st and 22nd, and then at the beginning of next year, I'll be doing a couple of weekend seminars down in California and the Los Angeles area.
Great.
And one in Ojai, California.
Oh yeah, nice. Yeah. And where can people find that stuff? Where can they find out about what you're up to?
Well, as soon as we pin down the dates for the next year one, it'll be posted on my website, which is www.3 and then written out principlesmentoring.com. 3principlesmentoring.com, which is the name of my business.
Good. Yeah, we'll put that stuff up where we post the this interview. Before we go, my friend, I could literally have this conversation for hours with you, but I want to be conscious of our time. Like, I think this beautiful marriage, this is kind of why I love doing what I do, it's this beautiful marriage between personal development, excuse the phrase, or whatever, it's kind of a clunky phrase to explain what we're up to here, but personal development and creativity, I think is just such an awesome place to be in. Like, I love this realm. And it's so fun to talk with you about creating in relationship to the three principles. So, but before we go, what would be, and really, I think this conversation could go on for a long time, so I feel a little clunky ending it. But what's a piece of advice that you would leave aspiring and established authors with? Like, what's something that you would want them to be be present to, or and maybe it's something we already talked about in the call, or maybe there's something fresh that's coming to mind right now.
Well, if you are enjoying what you're doing, keep doing it. And when it feels like it's not enjoyable, if you realize that has to do with how you're thinking about it rather than what you're doing, just recognizing that alone, it's built into every one of us to let go of what we know is causing us pain. So if you realize that where you're feeling stuck is just the way you're thinking about it. Without effort, you'll begin to let go of that thinking, and as your head clears, always you'll start to feel better and get new thinking again. So it's like hitting a refresh button on your computer. Right? So you just enjoy yourself until you're not, and if you realize that that's just thought and that thinking falls away, you'll see that always underneath whatever thinking that feels heavy or burdensome or creates pressure or stress or upset, when you let go of all of that thinking, it falls away naturally. Right? And we do that every day anyways. We just don't recognize that that's what we're doing. We're caught up in thinking about a problem, and then it's lunchtime and we go, oh, it's lunchtime, and we stop thinking about it and it falls away and we feel better. And we think it's because it's lunchtime rather than it's because my head cleared. Right? Or you go for a walk in the woods and you look around and say, oh my God, it's so beautiful, and your head clears and you feel better. And then if you don't realize that that's because your head cleared, you'll think it's because of the woods.
And it's a little of both in that case, maybe.
Well, I've seen lots of people in the woods who are worrying up a storm, and they're not seeing beauty anywhere. Let me tell you.
Yeah, no, that is a really good point, right? Because our thoughts are, in living in our thoughts, we're relating to our thoughts become this thing we relate to the world with.
That's right. We're going to feel whatever we're thinking, no matter who we are. We're built to do that, and so whatever you're thinking, you're going to feel. And if you don't like what you're feeling, you won't feel different until your thinking changes. And I love that when we let go of the old, we get new.
Yeah, and in there lies the inspiration. It's really great.
Yes.
So part of it, I think, too, and I'm placing this in the context of a lot of writers, I think, complain about the inner critic or writer's block. And I think what you just said addresses that so beautifully. Just recognizing our thoughts, like, okay, if something feels unpleasant, it's my thinking, recognizing that that's part of the nature of living, and that the thoughts will kind of come and go. They're transient.
Yeah. You know, if people are really interested in this, the book that Natasha and I wrote really goes into this in detail.
Yeah.
And I think it would really just help clarify all of what we've been talking about today, and make it much more accessible and practical for people on their day-to-day life.
Yeah, that's great. I couldn't recommend it enough. I think it's just such a fantastic, like you said, accessible read, and it's so beautifully written, and the form of it is really inviting, and it really helps people, I think, bring the three principles into their life in a really sort of simple way.
Well, we love that theme, coming home.
Yeah.
That whole notion of when we fall out of our limited conditioned thinking, everyone falls into a space where they feel at home with life, comfortable, open, relaxed, peaceful, where you can't help but to get inspired and fill up with feelings of well-being. Can't help it. So that's the metaphor we use, coming home.
Yeah, it's really beautiful. And that's, I love that. It's not something, and a lot of in part of the reason why using personal development to describe what you guys are up to feels clunky is, in a lot of the personal development worlds, it's like wellness is this distant thing that you've got to get through this elaborate obstacle course to achieve. Whereas in the three principles, what feels so intuitively powerful is like, it's just going home. It's like it's our innate state. It's our birthright.
The real joke is you can't develop what's already fully developed.
Right. Yeah, that's really great.
It's more of a recognition than a development.
Right. Wow, that's a really nice way to. Yeah. Yeah, and we can and actually a way to think about it is like, with our own thinking, with our best efforts, we can barely contain that thing because it still comes through.
Yeah, that's right. All the time, and we don't recognize it, or we don't know that it's our natural well-being shining through us.
Yeah, and even if it's moments, like even in really articulated stressful experiences, there's moments of peace in that.
Absolutely.
Where you're looking out the window.
As soon as the clouds of our thinking part, the inner sun shines through.
Yeah, so good.
Yeah,
awesome.
Sun breaks. You can expect sun breaks in Seattle.
Yeah,
That's what they say all the time in the weather here. You can expect sun breaks today.
Do you live? I didn't realize you lived in Seattle. Yeah, I'm down in Portland, so we're not far.
I'm an hour north of Seattle.
Oh, you are?
On Fidalgo Island, which is one of the San Juan Islands.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah,
awesome. Well, I look forward to seeing you in Portland. And Dick, and I just want to say, like, I absolutely, it's such a pleasure to talk with you, and you have just such a big heart, and your work is so compelling, and you articulate the 3 principles in such a clear, understandable way that makes it really accessible to me. And it's just such a pleasure to have you here. And I didn't realize that you had that much of a writing background, so it was really great to know that you were also teaching writing for a long time. And just thank you so much for your time and your generosity. And experiencing talking with you is like, it feels a little bit like a meditation, honestly.
No. Thanks, Ben.
Yeah, of course.
It's been a delight talking to you.
Cool. Thank you so much.
You bet. Bye-bye.
If you want more interviews like this, check us out at tonicbooks.online. In addition to other resources, we've made dozens of interviews like this to support aspiring and established authors who want to write, publish, and market their book with ease and impact. For more details, check out the description below.